Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to A Reason for Hope today. I get to be your host, Bo Willett, and I'm here with you.
Scott Richards. This guy, I'm known.
That guy.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. It's so good to be with you. It is, today's April what? 8th maybe? April 9th? 10th? Is it 10th? I'm 2 days back?
Yes. Yes. Get up with the times, Bo.
Totally.
You're living in the past, man.
And I did my devotion this morning, and I actually had to put the date on it. So that's kind of where I'm at. But anyway, welcome to A Reason for Hope. This is a Bible Q&A program live Monday through Friday. It is Arizona time, so it's 4 o'clock p.m. That's when the podcast goes live on YouTube, on Facebook, on our website, calvarychristianfellowship.com. And so there's multiple ways to kind of watch the program. I just mentioned 3, and that is the main ones. So you could go to A Reason for Hope on YouTube. You can also go to our Facebook site, which you just go to Facebook if you're I would say someone who uses Facebook, and you can go to A Reason for Hope and you'll find us there as well. It streams there. And also you can just go to calvarychristianfellowship.com and there's a watch live button, and you can view the show there as well. There's also an email so that you can participate. If you wanted to do it just by email, you can email us at questions@areason4hope.com. That's questions@areason4hope.com, and then we can get your emails. And I still email quite a bit, I must say. I'm kind of still in that mode. You know, maybe it's because I'm in my 50s, so email's kind of still my thing.
You're technically not a boomer, though.
No.
No, I can use that excuse.
You are the boomer.
I am your resident boomer.
Yes.
And loving it.
Yeah. But some
boomers would understand that reference.
I know
too.
some people love YouTube, and they just get on it and they just go through the comment corner and just go and chat away, and that's cool. And I do a live devotion every morning at 9 a.m. Arizona time on.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. On Calvary Christian Fellowship Facebook page. And that's actually where A Reason for Hope is. It's Calvary Christian Fellowship on Facebook.
Yeah, and one thing I would say about Bo's morning devo is I have probably cultivated a well-known reputation for proceeding through the Bible at less than warp speed.
You?
Yeah. 2 weeks ago, for instance, we got through 2 whole verses of the book of Nehemiah in one 45-minute Bible study. So if you like your in-depth stuff, then obviously, you can follow along with me. But if you want to go through the whole Bible in a way that you make serious headway and just come away with some amazing points of application, then I highly suggest making Morning Devo with Bo part of your experience.
Yeah, thanks.
How long did it take you to get through the Bible?
It took me 4.5 years.
Yeah.
So I got through the entire
Faster than
Bible.
J. Vernon McGee.
Yeah, 4.5 years, and I'm on my second round. So I'm in the book of Revelation right now.
Wow.
So isn't that cool?
That is cool.
I know. So it's exciting. So you can check that out at Calvary Christian Fellowship on the Facebook site. Or you can view the morning devotion with me, Bo, on our website at calvarychristianfellowship.com as well. If you just go into the ministry section, there's a page that's just devoted to the morning devo. And devo just stands for devotion, if you don't know. It just means like a time of devotion, getting in the Word, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's how you can contact us. We already have, I know, questions coming in. Our tech-savvy folk like Sean and Adrian, the Van Vactor, are putting different questions in our little chat. And so I have those, and I will get to them at some point. But as most of you have grown very accustomed to on A Reason for Hope, we usually start the show off with a update on a prophecy update,
right,
or a potential prophecy update on what's happening. And you you have some pretty interesting news.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you've been following along with what's going on here, the U.S. and Iran have entered into what they would call a ceasefire, a 2-week ceasefire. So people will say, well, what's the status of the ceasefire? Well, on the open source Intel site on X, and if you want to stay up to date, I'd highly recommend 3 sources. And you can do your own homework on that. First of all, our good friend Amir Sarfati, Behold Israel. He is on the
WhatsApp,
the Telegram site.
Oh,
and
okay.
I don't know if he's on WhatsApp as well, but I follow him on Telegram and does a tremendous job of posting, a lot of great content, a lot of live videos, things like that. Is it on WhatsApp as well?
No, it's on Telegram.
Okay, Telegram, yeah. And really, really solid, very grounded theologically as well as politically. Amir has some great contacts inside the powers that be in Israel, and so I would highly recommend that. I'd also recommend on internet Open Source Intel. Open Source Intel does a great job of curating and bringing in all kinds of different stories that relate to what's going on with Israel and what's happening in the world. Another fellow by the name of Raylan Givens, also a very well-connected individual, and both of those sites, Raylan Givens and Open Source Intel,
they're different sites.
Yeah, they're both on the X platform. But basically, when I get ready for the program, those are the sites I peruse. There's some other insights that I have from some people I know in Israel and things like this that I touch base with. But if you want to do it yourself and do your own prophecy update every day, I'd highly recommend visiting those sites. Having said this, people say, well, what's the status? Is there going to be peace? Are these negotiations going to be going anywhere? On the open source Intel site, just before airtime, they posted this. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, is preparing for the collapse of the U.S.-Iran negotiations and a return to war. Iran is redeploying its air defense systems and attempting to restore access to bombed underground missile sites. So essentially, the foray for peace has, run into a brick wall. Why? Well, some other developments that happened today, and tell us why. If you're familiar with this, the 2-week ceasefire is running concurrently with peace negotiations between Iran and the United States being held in Islamabad, Pakistan. Well, we would ask the question, why are they being held in Islamabad, Pakistan? And we want to give you the answer to all of this. Part and parcel of the reason these talks are all over but the shouting. I mean, they're, we're waiting for the mushroom cloud over them to appear on the horizon. Happened in concert with a quote from a man who is in charge of mediating these talks between the United States and Iran, the Pakistani Minister of Defense. He said this, and I quote, "Israel is evil and a curse for humanity. While peace talks are underway in Islamabad, a genocide is being committed in Lebanon. Innocent citizens are being killed by Israel, first Gaza, then Iran, and now Lebanon. Bloodletting continues unabated. I hope and pray people who created this cancerous state on Palestinian land to get rid of European Jews burn in hell."
Man.
So tell us what you really think about
intense.
Israel. Yeah, Mr. Defense
There's
Minister.
so much there.
And this is the mediator, right? This is the moderate guy.
Now, is there only one mediator in this thing?
Well, he's the main guy
He's the
that is
main
supposed
guy.
to be mediating between the United States and Israel.
Wow.
Which resulted in this response from Israel Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar. He said, Israel views with great severity these clear anti-Semitic blood libels from a government that claims to be, quote, promoting peace, calling the Jewish state a cancer is in effect a call for its destruction. Israel will defend itself against terrorists who swear to destroy it. Now, why is Pakistan so hot against Israel? Well, they're an Islamic state, but more than just an Islamic state, you got to understand something about Pakistan. Pakistan, by the way, if you remember the whole hunt for Osama bin Laden, they gave him complete security and a safe place to live in Pakistan, right next to the Pakistani equivalent of West Point, their main military academy. That's what made the raid that actually took out Osama bin Laden such an amazing piece of, I guess you could call it espionage, just an amazing raid, because it really went right into the teeth of the Pakistani military, who were pretty much defending this guy. So it tells you a little bit about what Pakistan is up to. But if you're going to understand where Pakistan fits into all of this and why it's so insane that this whole thing these negotiations are going on in Islamabad, here is a report from Shlomo Filber, who is a Jewish journalist. He is based in Israel, but his analysis here is pretty educational. He said the headline is Pakistan, the thief who became the policeman, and now the mediator. While Israel continues to operate in Lebanon, talks between the U.S. and Iran are set to begin in Islamabad. Apparently, both sides have arrived in Islamabad and are supposedly talking. Who is hosting? Pakistan, the country that possesses the first Islamic nuclear bomb. Pakistan is a nuclear power. A bit of history regarding Pakistan's nuclear power. Pakistan deceived the world about its nuclear program and in 1998 successfully developed its first nuclear weapon. The architect of the program, Abdul Khan, later established a black market network that proliferated nuclear technology and expertise to multiple countries, including Iran. In the early 2000s, he supplied Iran with hundreds of sophisticated centrifuges, along with blueprints and critical know-how, precisely what accelerated Iran's nuclear program during its most formative years. Iran learned from Pakistan how to buy time with the West, how to construct underground facilities, and how to transition from sanctions to deterrence as a threshold nuclear state. And now, the same Pakistan, deeply entangled in Iran's nuclear development, is positioning itself as a, quote, neutral mediator between Trump and Tehran. Why? Because it has clear interests. A long border with Iran, a significant Shia population at home, about 15 to 20% of Pakistan are Shia Islamists, a severe economic crisis, and a desire to secure American aid in exchange for, quote, stability, while avoiding sanctions as a partner of Iran. This is less mediation and more a smokescreen designed to preserve whatever remains of Iran's nuclear progress. Iran seeks breathing rooms to continue enrichment. Pakistan seeks legitimacy and economic relief. The U.S. under Trump seeks the appearance of diplomatic progress rather than direct confrontation. All parties understand each other, and each knows who is deceiving whom and when. The real question is whether Trump will choose to accept some of these deceptions in order to secure a deal. For Israel, the implication is clear. Do not trust Pakistani guarantees. Do not trust a 2-week ceasefire. The reality on the ground, enrichment, missiles, proxies, outweighs any declarations made in Islamabad. Those who enabled Iran's nuclear capabilities cannot suddenly become their gatekeepers. The paradox is a reminder. In geopolitics, there are no friends, only people with interests. And for Israel, the interest must remain singular, preventing a nuclear Iran at all costs, even if it means friction with Trump should he be drawn into the Pakistani trap. So, Pakistan is no friend of Israel. Obviously, their mediator gave that away. Pakistan has a vested interest in keeping things cordial with Iran because they are knee-deep in facilitating Iran's nuclear ambitions. They want to see Iran get the bomb. That's their point of interest here. The Trump administration, some believe, are looking for any kind of an off-ramp off-ramp possible to get out of this situation before the midterm elections take place, which could end up with a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate, which would then facilitate impeachment hearings against Iran. Some of the more crazed individuals are even saying the 25th Amendment, which provides for the removal of a president if they are either physically or mentally incapable of holding the office. That is being floated as a possibility of what's going on here. So the Trump administration is looking for any and every possibility of being able to exit this mess for, I think, political reasons. However, they are also nobody's fools. If they back out and Iran is allowed to continue their pursuit of a nuclear weapon, well, then the question comes up, why did we do any of this in the first place? Why were 13 Americans killed in this process? It's kind of the you're darned if you do and darned if you don't situation. Now, Lebanon, one of the reasons that the talks almost ostensibly blew up was because Israel decided that in spite of the fact that a 2-week ceasefire was declared in the region, this did not include what was going on in Lebanon. For those of you not familiar with what's happening in Lebanon, one of the main, perhaps the most important Iranian-sponsored proxies is Hezbollah, the terrorist group that is in Lebanon. To date, since the declaration of the ceasefire, there have been over 5,600 missiles launched from Lebanon at Israel. Most of them have been taken out. Some have done damage. Israel, by the way, did not take this sitting down. We talked a bit about this yesterday, but you may recall the pager bomber operation that Israel conducted against Hezbollah in Lebanon. They sold through a third-party country out of Taiwan these little pagers so that the Hezbollah command and control could communicate with their basically their lieutenants and their sergeants who were in the field. Well, what they didn't realize, and the reason they did that was they were using cell phones, and Israel was able to target their individuals using cell phones. So they went back to the old creaky pager technology, which would cause Israel not to be able to target their particular individuals. Well, Israel, in I think it was like a 7-year operation, manufactured these pagers with an explosive charge in each one. And so on a given signal, these pagers were, a page came through on these pagers. The sergeants and the lieutenants in charge of the Hezbollah terrorists in the field picked up their pagers to look at the message, and they blew up in their faces. So this was essentially a way of completely cutting off their supply side of things. Well, Israel outdid the pager bomber operation just this last week. What they ended up doing was they ended up being able to determine by infiltrating the digital connections that Hezbollah had with their command and control centers, the heavy hitters, the people that were giving the orders. They infiltrated that by basically using, I guess cyber piracy, if you will. You want to use that term. They were able, through cyber connections, hacking, if you will, to hack the entire Hezbollah system. And so they were able to determine at a moment's notice where over 200 of the main Hezbollah commanders were, not where they were 10 minutes ago, but where they were in real time. So in a 10-minute sphere, Israel struck over 200 of these commanders because they had precise knowledge of where they were because they were online, essentially. And 200 of their major commanders and control individuals were taken out in this particular operation. Well, you better believe that was kind of like pouring a Coke on a red anthill as far as the individuals involved, and probably motivated the less than diplomatic comments that we see coming from the Secretary of Defense of Pakistan, because it's absolutely humiliating Again, the Lebanese people are coming to the point where they've just about had it with this whole thing. The Lebanese government is now entering into negotiations with Israel on the basis of essentially coming to an agreement that would allow the Lebanese government and Israel to combine together to completely remove Hezbollah from Lebanon.
Region. Wow.
So that is another blow that is coming in that particular direction. Finally, they've just had enough, and they realize they're betting on the wrong horse. They see that once Iran and the Islamic Republican Guard Corps is out of business and is completely unable to be able to finance them or restock their weapons, they're fighting a losing battle. And so they put their finger up in the air and said, ooh, the wind seems to be blowing from Israel right now. Let's make peace with them. Because Israel, the IDF, has essentially not just reclaimed the territory in Lebanon that leads to the Litani River. That was supposed to be completely demilitarized based upon the final negotiations of the last Lebanon-Israeli war, basically Hezbollah and so forth. Hezbollah basically looked at the UN peacekeepers there and said, hey guys, don't mind us, we're just, digging terror tunnels and launching missiles here. And the UN looked the other way. Well, Israel just came in and took all that territory. Now they're moving beyond the Litani River to the next main river up to the north from the Litani River. They're talking about putting into place a government that would be dominated by Lebanese Christians rather than Lebanese Muslims to control those two particular areas with Israeli backing. So Lebanon's basically looking at this and going, we either negotiate with Israel or they're going to set up, say, a southern divided state that we're not going to control any longer. So again, the Lebanese are tired of being used as human shields. They're tired of being played as patsies by the Islamic Republican Guard Corps, and it does appear that tide is beginning to turn. Now, one other thing that we need to understand, because this is another huge part of all of this, is that the U.S. entered into this peace agreement with Iran based upon the promise that Iran would allow oil shipping to take place through the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil, the United States doesn't use this oil, but 20% of the world's oil, a large portion of which goes to China, a large portion of which goes to Western Europe, has been basically stopped by Iran. You go, well, how could Iran do this if their military is being blown up? Well, all you need do is have in place, say an anti-tank missile or something like that along the shoreline, anywhere you want to pick, and launch it at a oil tanker and blow the thing up. If you do that once, understand something. The people that insure these oil tankers are going to say, we're out. If you put your oil tanker through all of this and it blows up, this is all on you. And these companies that own these oil tankers go, we're not going to put our oil tankers through there and have it blow up and, be $10 million in debt as a result of that sort of a thing. And so the threat of a terroristic kind of an action is enough to stop all of this. So how do you stop, one, random, say 10-man Islamic Republican Guard Corps terroristic unit from setting up anywhere along that line and launching a missile? The only way you do that is if the powers that be in the IRGC say, we're not going to do that anymore. So this is Iran's last playing card, in essence. They're going to play terrorist in that particular region and stop all of that oil flow. Well, Trump was asked about this as he was about to get onto the helicopter leaving for Camp David earlier today. He said there are reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers to go through the Hormuz Strait. They better not be, and if they are, they better stop now. So people ask the question, well, okay, Iran says they want to charge people to go through this strait. Why can't they do that? I mean, we charge people for going through the Panama Canal. People are charged fees going through the Suez Canal. Why can't they just be in charge of the Strait of Hormuz? For one really important reason. The Panama Canal was built by the United States. It's not a natural waterway.
Yeah.
The Suez Canal, built largely by the British and the Egyptians. Egyptians own it. It's artificial. They control this. You have to go through locks and so forth. And so the Strait of Hormuz, completely natural. It's a complete, natural waterway.
And from what I understand, the South is a different country. Like in the North is basically, there's like in the strait itself, there's like a line, an invisible line.
Right. On one side of the country, you have Iran. And on the other side of the line, you have Gulf state countries like Kuwait and Bahrain and Oman and so on that other side. And this strait leads into the main Persian Gulf. But it's that narrow waterway that is so strategic because, as we said, 20% of the world's oil goes right through there. So Iran is basically holding the world hostage based upon this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so that's their bargaining chip, really the last one they kind of have. And it will be very interesting to see how that gets resolved or settled. The other thing is this. People say, well, wait a minute, I thought we destroyed their government. We came and we bombed all their leaders. We have the third iteration of an Ayatollah who's basically a cardboard cutout character running the show there. Why is Iran still fighting? Well, you need to understand what happened when you took out all these bigwigs. Essentially, the Iranian Republican Guard Corps splintered into maybe 25 different subgroups. They're all led by a different warlord, if you will. They don't get all their instructions from the Ayatollah or from the president of Iran. They're essentially doing their own thing, deciding whether they're going to launch missiles or not. And so essentially what would have to happen as a result of all of this, the question comes up, okay, you're negotiating with these two individuals who call themselves the head of the Iranian parliament, the president of Iran, Pezeshkian. What influence do they have over these 25 individuals who are running these little tiny fragmented parts of the Iranian Republican Guard Corps? You can say, well, we've declared a ceasefire, but any one of them can launch missiles anytime they want. So it's a mess, basically. That's what I'm trying.
It sounds really biblical.
That's what I'm really trying to tell you here. It is a huge mess, but it's kind of our mess at this point.
Yeah.
And people will say, it's easy to get into a war. It's much harder to get out, especially if the other side says, no, I'm not done fighting yet. It's kind of like, say, a husband and a wife getting into a fight, and they have a disagreement, and then one or the other says, I'm tired of fighting, let's make up, and the other isn't ready to do that. You could be ready to make up, but if the other one isn't ready to make up, the fight's still on.
Yeah.
And so that's really, in essence, what's happening. Israel, and this brings it back to the biblical side of things, a couple of things about this, is that Israel is going to continue to put pressure on Lebanon to come to an agreement with them. And instead of being a proxy state of Iran, which it has been for years and years and years, prior to that it was a proxy state of Yasser Arafat's PLO, basically they're saying, you tired of this? You're tired of getting trampled both ways and all this stuff? You play ball with us, we will guarantee your safety. And the IDF has shown they're very good at guaranteeing people's safety. They have a very, very effective military. So, again, that's absolute humiliation for the Shia Muslims there. If you really want to hurt a Islamic country, take their territory.
Yeah.
That's basically what they live for. That is considered an affront to Allah. It flies in the face of their vision of having a worldwide Islamic caliphate. And so if you want to hurt them, take back their territory.
Yeah, I do think a lot of Westerners probably have never read the Quran.
No.
And so if you've never read the Quran, then you're not going to understand much of what the guy from Pakistan, kind of what was behind that statement.
Right.
Because when you read the Quran, even early on in the Quran, it makes it very clear that if you have any land that is ruled at any point by Muslims, and that land gets taken away, then it is a massive affront.
Yeah, that is ultimate
Yeah,
humiliation.
you need to go and get that land back.
Yeah, and if you don't, your chances of ending up in Islamic paradise with the virgins and all that other stuff, out the window.
Yeah, and if you read the Quran, there's almost every paragraph ends with, a warning of burning of some point.
Yeah.
Your eyes burning, your face burning. There's
Your legs dipped in molten lead.
Yeah.
For missing a prayer time.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, so it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
It's a pretty intense reading.
Yeah.
I mean, that's for sure. It's funny. It's like I was looking through some of the chats, some of the questions, and a lot of them are from atheists, and they have a lot of comments about the Bible. But I would just say, hey man, have you ever read the Quran? Because I would love to see what the questions would be towards that piece of literature.
Yeah.
Because if you have such a kind of animosity towards the Bible, towards the biblical texts, and you kind of, what about this and what about that?
Yeah, but free Palestine, man.
I would just
whoa.
say, hey man, go for it.
Yeah.
And I'm a guy who, of course, was raised very progressive and very atheistic, and very
And I was raised really conservative and atheistic.
Atheist, yeah,
so there you go.
Yeah, and I think more with my dad's Marxist views, there was an animosity towards Christianity. That was the one you kind of hit. That was the one you can hate. That's the one you can. It was almost like open season on Christianity. That is the prime target. But really, I never even heard of the Quran. I never really thought much about it. Or I mean, I might have heard it in like every now and then, but I never knew what it said. I never kind of was encouraged to read it by anybody or anything like that. It wasn't until later on in life that I decided to read the Quran and thought, hey, I'm not going to listen to what other people say. I'm going to read it for myself. And then you read it and you go, whoa, this is interesting.
Yeah.
This is an interesting book.
Yeah.
It felt very elementary to me. It felt like almost like I was back in junior high, and there was like, kind of the bullying of junior high that goes on,
Right, yeah.
Kind of the one-upman, kind of the one-up everything, you hit me in the arm, I'm going to hit you harder.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
It felt very much like that.
You felt like you're getting stuffed in a locker, huh?
Yeah, it was all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really, really interesting. But so I would just, say, hey, my fellow atheist progressives out there, that I certainly was in your camp. Maybe just pick it up and read it. And, you might have some questions towards that as well.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that I think all this basically comes down to is we in the United States, and I just speak for us, and this broadcast goes out all over the world, but I guess we could say Western civilization in general, but especially in the United States, are incredibly ignorant of the fact that the people that we are dealing with in the Middle East, dominated by Islamic culture, look at life completely differently than we do. I mean, there is almost no shared ground to talk about. And when we've seen administration after administration say, oh, if you remember the dreaded Green Revolution, we're going to bring democracy to the Middle East. And I remember there was a picture on National Geographic magazine of some woman in a burqa, holding up her finger. She was in Baghdad, and it was the first time that she voted, and she had a little mark on her fingers that showed that she voted. And it's like, oh, that's great. They're going to see that democracy and Western-style economics, this is really going to be the pathway. And the whole thing ended up being a flaming disaster. If you don't think so, how many of you want to spend time in Baghdad on a vacation? It's just basically turned into a war zone. Why? Because the bottom line is the Muslim world sees the world differently than we do. And we try to use our westernized ideas, especially secularized Western ideas. Okay, what do we want out of life? We want to have a nice, peaceful life.
Yeah, I want to fall in love.
I want to have a family.
Yeah.
I want my kids to end up, with as much or better of a life than I had. I want to have a 2-car garage. I want to, that's what they want, right? No, they really, really don't. And our westernized ideas is diplomacy, and if we talk nice and we use these bridge building words and so on, then they're going to come around and see that we're really nice people, and they want to be nice, and we're all going to be nice together, and we're going to bring in this new world order. You need to realize these people do not respect nice. They really don't. We've mentioned a couple of times this week about a trip to a place called the Shuk in Jerusalem. If you want to find out how bargaining goes on in the Middle East and what their culture is really all about, go down to the Shuk, because we've heard about Arab horse trading and that byword and so on. You go down there and you see real horse trading going on, and that means screaming, that means yelling, that means cursing, that means talking about this far away from somebody and spitting in their face while you're doing this bargain, and they scream and they yell and their faces are red and they're gesticulating, and then they strike a bargain. And they immediately stop and hug each other and exchange goods and services, and they move on. But it's part of the deal. You have to show that you are strong, that you are no one to be trifled with, and that if you try to pull one over on me, I'm going to come after you. I'm going to come after your kids. I'm going to come after your goats. I'm going to come after everything. That's how it works, right? That's the culture over there. We are completely ignorant of that. I mean, the first trip you take to the Shuk, I was just like, whoa, this is like the Tankerverde swap meet on acid or something like that.
Is there anything
PCP or something like that?
I just thought, a couple things I thought of. One of them was like San Francisco. If you've ever hung out in Frisco a little bit, you have different kind of parts of the town. And LA is a little bit like this too, where you have like Chinatown or this kind of thing. And, you kind of have, the Russians live here and this group lives over there and that kind of thing. And you kind of, when you're from a bigger city, you kind of have a little bit of an idea of just how maybe different we think about things.
Yeah.
And that can happen. I was thinking about that, and I thought, for those out there, you can go to a big city and you can see kind of that people do live differently, or they think differently about different things. But one thing about the American idea is that we do agree to a certain kind of way of living in general. Like maybe not the macro or the micro, but the macro, the big things.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, the golden rule.
Yeah.
We just basically all agree that's a good thing.
Yep.
Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you.
Yeah, and there's freedom, and if you want to practice something, as long as you're not hurting anybody, we kind of agree to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's not...
They don't feel that way.
Right. That's not how it goes. Even if you walk over there and say, hey, I'm just going to do what I like to do. But if that liking, what you like to do doesn't agree with Sharia law, and then
you get hung.
Yeah, then you have an issue.
Yeah.
And growing up progressive, man, like a religious law, like coming underneath religious law was like no.
Yeah.
Like as a progressive, like an atheist progressive, it was like, did I want to come under a religious law? I mean, that's why we fought against supposed Christianity so hard. The other thing I was thinking of, by the way, was the vision in Daniel of the statue that is representative of major empires.
Right.
The head of gold being Babylon, and it goes down.
Yeah.
You have the Medo-Persian Empire, you have the Grecian Empire, and then you have this Roman Empire, and then there's these toes that have this mixture.
Yeah, of iron and clay. Yeah.
Yeah, is there anything with that, with kind of just the interesting players in the end times of, I know Israel's going to make a covenant with death, meaning Israel's not going to be doing the right thing.
Right.
And nor do we believe that Israel is always doing the right thing.
Right.
And we realize that. But is this kind of last world empire, what is that all about with the iron mixed with clay?
Yeah, there's the book of Daniel does give us an insight into what the meaning behind all of that is. And I mean, this is no additional charge, obviously. But one of the really wonderful things about the Bible is that people say, well, that's just your interpretation. Well, the Bible is a self-interpreting book in many ways. When we talk about, for instance, this statue, it's described for us in the book of Daniel, chapter 2. And again, the last part of it you talk about. Okay, we have the head of gold. That was Babylon. Scholars believe that the reason that it was the head of gold was because Babylonian government was a complete autocracy. When Nebuchadnezzar said jump, you said how high. There was no checks and balances, no legislation. No one questioned what the guy said.
And it clearly says you, Nebuchadnezzar, are the head of gold.
Yeah, complete and total power over all of his citizens.
Right.
Then the Medes and the Persians came up. Well, they had the law of the Medes and the Persians, a rule of law that even the king had to be under. Once a law was passed, he couldn't change it.
Wow.
Right? So it was inferior, in a sense, to that. Then you had the Grecian Empire come on the scene, and that was bronze. That was inferior to the Medes and the Persians as far as its ability to coalesce, and it basically hung together as long as Alexander the Great was doing his conquering. Then he divvied up his kingdom between 4 generals and said, hey, fight it out, and whoever's worthy to rule will defeat the other 3. Well, they never were able to do that. It was basically just at a standstill. Dominated the world, but certainly not on the level that the Medo-Persian government did. Then you have the 2 legs that are like iron. That is the Roman Empire, better part of 250, 300 years. Imperial Rome was able to dominate the entire world and control the world through the Caesars and so on. Julius Caesar, again, putting away the idea of even being ruled by a senate or anything like that. Caesar was pretty much it, and then it kind of bounced back and forth. Then you have the feet that are mixed with iron and clay. Well, people say, well, what is the interpretation of that? Well, in verse 43 of Daniel chapter 2, we're told, as you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and the kingdom will not be left to another people. It shall break in pieces and consume all of these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke the pieces of the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure. So this last form of a world-dominating empire is going to be a coalition of kings, peoples, that are basically put under pressure to coalesce with each other. But for ethnic reasons, maybe even most importantly, religious reasons, traditional reasons, these sort of things, they're not going to be able to hold it together any longer than maybe the first 3.5 years of the Antichrist rule and reign. And the only reason that's going to work is because they're going to be incredibly deceived satanically. It's going to be spiritual deception. But the 3.5 year mark, peace is going to be taken from the world. The Gog and Magog invasion is going to happen in Israel. Russia and Iran and their fellows are going to attack and try to wipe out Israel, because they are basically going to say to the Antichrist, well, we're going to just do what we want to do, and their guards down and all that. The Antichrist is going to respond very strongly. And again, if you want to read through a description of the various military campaigns that go on, Daniel chapters 11 and 12 talk quite a bit about what's going to happen in the last days, which is going to lead up to what we call the Battle of Armageddon. What most people don't understand is, although the Battle of Armageddon is going to start out as a war of all nations gathered together at Israel for one last throwdown, who's going to win the show. The Antichrist, the kings of the East, I believe China and their allies are going to be a part of all of that. The king of the South, the Islamic forces, the king of the North, that would be, again, Russia and so on, coming together and fighting it out in this last thing. But the Battle of Armageddon is basically going to culminate with the Antichrist seeing Jesus return and saying to these gathered forces, Jesus is coming back, I think we can take him. And the world will agree on one thing: they don't want Jesus ruling and reigning over them. And Jesus is going to make short work of this when he returns.
I find that's a great breakdown, by the way, Scott. I was reading Joel 3 today, the prophet Joel chapter 3. And, because there's a lot of talk about, Zionism today, and you hear that term floated around a lot. And it's used a lot in the prophets in dealing with kind of God's return to Zion. And to the place of Israel, specifically to Jerusalem, specifically to even a mountain in Jerusalem.
Right.
And I found Joel 3 kind of neat, because it kind of shows that, God is judging the nations. God is going to judge the nations, and we see that there's for a multitude of reasons, but we see predominantly for why they treated Israel the way they did.
Right.
And Israel, it's not like Israel has it all together. It's not like Israel is, in a sense, got it all right spiritually during the time of Joel. Like, during the time of Joel, did Israel and Judah, if we use those terms to split the country,
right,
did they have it together?
No.
The answer is no.
No.
Right? But Joel, in the prophecy, it makes it really clear that, hey, you guys' treatment, even though you guys are being used to judge them, and that's in other prophets as well, the way you've treated them, there is an accounting of it.
Yeah, it's like being foolish enough to discipline somebody else's kid.
Yeah. It's
not going to work out well for you.
Yeah. So you get the idea that whole end time judgment has to deal with this accounting, this reckoning,
right,
to the nations for their views on Israel. So it kind of creates another thought, and that is, man, if you're going to speak ill, speak ill of Israel and the anti-Zionist or whatever it is, there's a lot of attacks, right, verbal attacks, that you got to be really careful, it would seem, because it seems like a lot of these prophets, it's not that they're commending the nation of Israel for doing the right things, but they also are making it clear that there's an accounting for those that come against her, it seems to me like people have kind of missed that. They've kind of forgotten that there's going to be an accounting.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this in the program yesterday, but it bears repeating. When we talk about being pro-Israel, right? Well, a couple things, and I think you really articulated it well, is that just because Israel were the sons and daughters of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, didn't mean they were perfect. Far from it.
Yeah, far from it.
Again, we talked about, Elijah complaining to God, saying, they've torn down your altars and killed your prophets, and I alone am left. And God had to say, buck up, Elijah. I've still got 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed the knee to Baal. Well, you're talking about 7,000 out of 1 million people? That's not a lot.
Right.
But God has always had a righteous remnant. And, the thing that we have to understand is twofold. And this is, I think, where a lot of the nuance in the discussion of Zionism, Christian Zionism gets thrown out the window by people like Tucker Carlson and stuff like this, is that God made unconditional promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he would bless their descendants, that he would eventually put them into a place where they would have their own land. The boundaries and barriers are described in such a way that Israel has never fully entered into the land that God promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But they would have their land geographically. God would be faithful to give the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that land. He has that unconditional covenant with them. He said, if my covenant with day and night can be broken, so my covenant with the people of Israel can be broken. However, we also need to understand that God has always said to the people of Israel, right, that you got a decision to make. If Baal is God, serve him. If the Lord is God, then serve him. How long will you falter between two opinions? And so, again, we see even in the kings of Israel, there were kings of Israel loyal to God. There were kings of Israel that were loyal to idols. It didn't mean just because you were king of Israel that you were right with God, or that everything was going to turn out well for you in eternity. It came down to God basically saving people the way he has always saved them, through faith, through trusting in his promises. And so what we are saying with Christian Zionism is not, oh, well, everyone who has Jewish blood is going to heaven just because they have Jewish blood, Jewish ethnicity. No, we're not saying that. But Jews do have advantages in every way, the Apostle Paul said in the book of Romans. Again, they have the covenants. They have the revelation of God. They have this advantage, in a sense, over any other nation in the world, because God spoke to the world through the Jewish people, culminating in speaking to the world through Jesus, who, according to the flesh, was a son of David, a man of Judah, and so on. What we're saying by Zionism is this. We're saying that God's promise to restore Israel and to give the final culmination of his promises to Israel, their own land, as described in the Word, is still valid and is still yet future. That what we're seeing with Israel being back in the land is a foreshadowing of this, that we see foreshadowed in passages like, say, for instance, Ezekiel 37, where we see the valley of dry bones, where we first see the bones that are just scattered, and can these bones live again? Ezekiel says, the bones reassemble, flesh and organs and all this other stuff come on the bones, but there's no life in them. And then Ezekiel's told to prophesy to the spirit and say, come and cause these to come alive. And so, we see that there is going to be a physical regathering of Israel and then a spiritual regathering of Israel, and both will be true. And you read through Ezekiel 36 all the way through 39, and you see repeated over and over and over again that Israel would lay desolate, that it would be a wasteland, and then the land would be restored, the people would be restored to the land, and then finally they would be restored to a relationship with God. All Christian Zionism does is acknowledge those particular truths and holds fast to the idea that God is working out this particular plan. And at the end of the line, Israel, in the 1,000-year reign of Christ, is going to be where Jesus rules from. It is going to be the straw that stirs the drink. It's going to be the number one nation in the world, and those physical promises that were made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are going to be fulfilled at that time. That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
And as far as, the wind beginning to blow and so on, the remnant, according to, an article on Joel Rosenberg's website, there are over 1 million Jewish people out of 17 million Jews in the world
Yeah.
who now acknowledge Jesus is their Messiah. That righteous remnant is still there. But God's promise to Abraham, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, reiterated down the line, even by a guy like the prophet Balaam about Israel. I can't curse those who God has blessed, so on.
And
We say those promises are still in effect. And anyone who says they're not or tries to spiritualize away the thing, the burden of proof is on them, because you've got to read into the Scripture to come to that conclusion, not read out of it.
Yeah, I think I always hear people really misread that Galatians passage, the Israel of God.
Right.
And that's kind of the big one that they use to kind of, it seems like, kind of have this replacement kind of theology.
Right.
But there's a real strong warning in Romans that for the church not to get cocky and think that it has it all together, and somehow Israel as a whole, as a whole nation, not just the northern 10 tribes,
right,
are that they one day are going to be revived, and that the church is really given that warning of not being too cocky, or else they, it says, what does it say? Like, hey, if Israel was
these branches are broken off to make room for you.
Yeah, what happens if you get a little cocky here?
Yeah, same thing can happen. The other thing is this, and I know we're kind of running out of time, is that Paul also emphasizes that the reason the whole church is here right now is to provoke Israel to jealousy, to make them want to have a relationship with God like we do. Well, calling them Christ killers and referring to them like the guy from Pakistan did, cancer and all the stuff like these so-called influencers do today, I don't think that's making any Jews jealous to receive what these influencers
That's a
got.
good point. That's a good point.
So let's live our life in such a way that people see the love of Yeshua, the Messiah, in us, and our Jewish friends will want to know him too.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, thanks for joining us today, and have a great weekend, okay? You guys take care.
God bless you.
You've been listening to A Reason for Hope. Thank you again for joining us as we continue our journey through God's Word, one question of the heart at a time. Until we meet again, we would love to connect with you. You can text or email your questions to questionsforhope@gmail.com. You can also find out more about our ministry at calvarychristianfellowship.com. And be sure to join us next time on A Reason for Hope. A Reason for Hope is an outreach ministry of Calvary Christian Fellowship in Tucson, Arizona.